Hello everyone, thank you for joining me. My name is Sarah, and in today's video we're going to be going over how to build master assemblies within your RedTeam Flex database. So you can see here I am within my RedTeam Flex database, and I've navigated down to the configuration menu, which is where we're going to go to set up our master assemblies here within our RedTeam Flex database. So really, the first question that we want to answer today is what is an assembly, and therefore what is a master assembly. Then we're going to talk about how to build these within your database, how to utilize them within your projects, and how to edit them along the way. So an assembly within RedTeam is really our term for the breakdown of costs under a given cost code as you're building your estimate. We may break down cost codes like masonry into components such as bricks, mortar, labor for installation. We may break down the costs for labor or for general requirements into various subcomponents. That would be what we would call an assembly. And if we'd like to break down our cost codes in that way within our estimates, what you may find is that you may break down certain cost codes in similar or identical ways across multiple projects. And that's where the master assembly comes into play. By building master assemblies, we build default breakdowns of costs for our cost codes. That way we can more easily plug and play with larger pieces into our estimates. So when I add masonry to my estimate for any given project, I can choose the master assembly for masonry that breaks down those costs in the way that I want it to for that type of project. We're going to look here first at how to build a master assembly, and you'll get a good idea through that of how this can be utilized. So in my configuration menu, I'm going to click on Master Assemblies. The first time you come here, you're going to find that we have one master assembly for each of your cost codes already built for you. And what you're going to find within each of those master assemblies is simply a lump sum subcontract line item. So let's go ahead and take a look at masonry, for example. We can see our masonry cost code has multiple master assemblies here. So with this same 4,000 cost code, I can have as many different breakdowns of costs as I want. We're going to look at this original one here titled simply masonry that has one item and a lump sum unit of measure. That's what your original cost code master assemblies are going to look like the first time you come to this menu. And if we open up those existing master assemblies for each of our cost codes, this allows you to see the breakdown under that cost code. And what we can see is that these default master assemblies that we start you out with just have one lump sum subcontract line item. Now, if you don't plan on using assemblies in your estimating and you don't need to break down your cost codes into subcomponents, this may be fine for you. You can utilize these master assemblies and build your estimates with simple lump sums under each cost code. However, if you'd like to break your cost codes down into more detail, either for the purposes of your estimating, for the purposes of your vendors providing accurate quotes, or for the purposes of your customer viewing the scope of work on their proposal in that level of detail, we can go ahead and build out this assembly with multiple items. So what I'm going to do here is break down my masonry cost code into several components. But the first thing I'm going to do, before I even break this cost code down into its items, is to title it and choose the quantity and unit of measure for this particular master assembly. So you can see here it's titled masonry by default because that's the name of the cost code. 04000 is masonry. I hit the pencil and I have the ability to name this assembly. Now I may leave it as masonry if I'm simply putting in the standard breakdown for masonry that I use on every single project. But if I plan to have several different types of breakdowns or assemblies for the masonry cost code, depending on the type of project, I can use this description here to tell myself when I might use this. So we're going to say masonry assembly for commercial projects. Or better yet, we can say masonry assembly for apartment complexes, right? So if I'm building brick apartment complexes, I might create a masonry assembly that allows me to break down my costs for masonry per apartment unit or per building. So that's where I would come over here to my unit of measure and choose an appropriate unit of measure. So I could say each, for example. My each could be apartment units, could be floors of the apartment, or could be buildings. And we'll assume that our default quantity is 1 each. We'll say this is for floors of our apartment complexes. And per floor, we require these items and costs per floor for masonry. So now that I've gone ahead and titled this and given it a unit of measure, I'm going to go ahead and hit the floppy disk to save. Now remember, this will just be one of possibly multiple master assemblies for masonry. Now I can build out the items or the costs per floor for masonry in my apartment complexes. And to do that, I'm first going to edit this lump sum subcontract line item to kind of repurpose it because I don't actually need it in here. So I'm going to hit the pencil and I'll call this one bricks. This item will be bricks, and I'm going to describe the type and quality of bricks or anything else that I may need to include. This type of narrative or description is going to be visible for my vendors on my request for quote, and if I choose, I can include it on the scope of work on my customer proposal. Now, the next thing that I want to pay attention to are these 2 checkboxes here. Listed is asking me if I'd like this item to be visible in the scope of work on the proposal by default. So if I say yes, that item will show on the proposal document in the scope of work section. The next checkbox is this a variable item quantity? And what that's asking is, if I were to vary the default quantity for this assembly, should we multiply this item by the above quantity? And in most cases, that's going to be yes. For example, if I'm building out the breakdown of costs per floor of my apartment complexes, I would want the number of bricks to be dependent on the number of floors. If I up the quantity to 3 floors, I would want to automatically multiply the quantity of bricks. So if I say that per floor, I need 3 tons of brick at a unit cost of $1,500 per ton, I would want, when I have 3 floors in my apartment building, that variable item quantity will cause this 3 tons to multiply by 3 floors, and I will now have 9 total tons of brick for the project, and it will calculate my cost automatically for me. The last piece that I need to pay attention to here in the item itself is the cost type or category, which is going to allow me to choose from my 5 basic cost types, which are labor, subcontract, materials, equipment, and other. And notice that you can create custom categories within each cost type. But we're going to go ahead and say that this is a materials cost. And then we'll hit the floppy disk to save that item. Now that's just one item. We're going to add 2 more to make sure we have a nice fleshed out master assembly here. Down here is where we will add additional items. And we can do that in one of 2 ways. I can select from my master inventory items, which are created over here in the configuration menu. There's a space to create inventory items. A master inventory item is simply a line item like this bricks that's already been filled out because you utilize that unit of measure and unit cost for bricks on a regular basis. So you could go ahead and create those items such as bricks, mortar, 1/4 inch conduit, concrete mix, anything that you provide or include in your estimates at a standard unit of measure and unit cost, you can build as an inventory item. And that just saves you the time of filling out all these fields every time you create a master assembly or every time you create a custom assembly within an estimate. But we're going to build out a couple of items from scratch. So we'll go ahead and fill this one in as mortar. Again, I want it to be listed on my customer proposal, and I want it to be a variable item quantity, meaning it will change in proportion to the assembly quantity. So we'll go ahead and say that mortar is also a materials cost, and that in general, we measure mortar by pounds. So we can say we need perhaps 85 pounds of mortar per floor of apartment complexes. And again, it's a variable item quantity, so it will go ahead and multiply by the number of floors as we build our estimates. So what's the unit cost per pound for mortar? And we'll say that that is $2.50 a pound, which will then auto-calculate the cost here. Again, we can put in our description if we'd like, and we can describe the mortar here and add that item. Now the last item I'm going to add is going to be labor for installation, and I'm actually going to look for my inventory item that I have for that. Simply by searching the keyword installation, under my labor costs here, I can see we've saved several different labor for installation items. So we can pick our item, and we can see here that it's filling in for me the category, the unit of measure, and the unit cost. So I can see that I normally measure labor for installation by hours at a unit cost of $45 an hour. And I can go ahead and now simply check the boxes as I wish, add in the quantity, and we'll say we need perhaps 120 hours per floor for installation. And we'll go ahead and describe what is included in installation labor. And we'll add. So now I've got all of my items here. It's going to go ahead and show you if those are inventory items. They have the green check mark. And I've saved all of these items. So I can continue adding more, or I can just go ahead and X out. All of my changes here are saved. If I hit cancel, that will of course cancel the changes. So now I've built masonry assembly for apartment complexes, and at any time I can come back here and edit that. If I've never used it before, I will be able to delete it, but if I have used it before, I can simply come back in and choose to inactivate it here in the description header if I choose never to use that master assembly again. From there, we're going to go look at how to add this to your project and how to build those master assemblies as you go. So we're going to look at our Haunted Mansion renovation project and come to our estimate page within the request stage of the project, which is when our estimating feature is active. Now, if you're using our new cost estimate, you'll simply come in here and add a cost code or assembly to search for that assembly by name. And I can simply look for masonry, and there it is, masonry assembly for apartment complexes. Notice how I can recognize it from all the other masonry master assemblies I've built in the past based on that title. So now that I've added it in, we can see that as I expand this, my items are already here, and all it's waiting for is for me to put in a quantity and say that this apartment complex has 4 floors. Right? So now I can see all those costs multiply, and I have my costs for bricks, mortar, and installation. And in fact, we forgot to put in a quantity for labor, so if I needed to make an edit or a correction here, I can do so. And we can say that we need 120 hours for those 4 floors. Right? So there's our total costs. Notice that all of this is editable. So this master assembly is giving you a default, but you can edit the unit costs if those change. You can edit the quantities as needed, even if they don't match up exactly with your standard default for per floor costs. You have the capability to customize this master assembly for the given project. Now, if you want to create a master assembly as you go, we can add a new cost code and select something like concrete. Right here, we add concrete. And now I can build assembly items right here. So we can call this concrete mix, and we'll leave all these costs as subcontract. Let's say we write a subcontract for concrete installation on our apartment complex projects. We can hit this plus bubble to add a couple more items. This can be forms, and this can be installation labor, right? But we're going to keep them all under subcontract. And all we need to do is add in at least a quantity of 1 into our cost code heading to allow us to build out quantities and unit costs for our items in the assembly. So if I go ahead and change this to bags, we can say we need 50 bags of concrete at $12.50 a piece. We can change forms to each and say that we need a dozen forms at $45 a piece. And then we need how many hours of installation, right? And we can say 65 hours at $35 an hour. Now, as we build out that assembly, right, this could be unique to this project. And if that's the case, we simply move on and build a new assembly next time. But if I find that this might be repeatable in future projects, all I need to do is click on the cost code to save this as a master assembly. Again, notice that up here, I can change the title to make this concrete for apartments. Now I can save that as a master assembly, and I'll be able to find it again in the future. You'll also be able to edit it from the configuration menu. So that has been a look at how to create and utilize master assemblies within your projects. We will have other videos if you need more information on inventory items or the ability to build out your estimates in general. But for now, thank you so much for joining us, and thank you for choosing Red Team.